I can't help but wonder how many consulates could have been improved, how many embassies could have been better protected, and how many more of our patriotic American diplomats would be safer today.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair will now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much. I know the hour is late, but Madam Secretary, I need to go back to something. The ARB.
After more than 100 witness interviews, including more than 80 with witnesses no other committee of Congress talked to.
You know, maybe it's because I'm getting older and care about legacy, reputation, that kind of thing. But there's an 83-year-old gentleman named Ambassador Pickering. And I've heard a lot of testimony. I was there for his deposition. I was also a transcribed interview. I don't remember which it was. And then before his testimony before the Oversight Committee. And when he talked about his appointment to the ARB, he talked about what an honor it was. I think the thing that bothers me about a lot of this that has gone on is that when there have been attacks on the ARB, it's as if, I mean, it's like attacking him. And at 83 years old, I refuse to sit here and let that go by. And I remember listening to him, and I said to myself, you know, this is the kind of guy that we all ought to honor, serving under presidents for 40 years, Democrat and Republican, high up on the chain with regard to integrity. I mean, I don't even say I even attack this guy, all right? And one of the things he said in his testimony, he said, and this was, you appointed him, and he talked about the appointment, and I quote from a June 4th testimony. He said, Chris Stevens worked for me as my special assistant for 2 years when I was Undersecretary of State. This was not any kind of vendetta, but I felt that Chris gave me 2 wonderful years of his life in supporting me in very difficult circumstances, and that I owed him, his family, and the families of the other people who died.
What difference at this point does it make? We had 4 dead Americans.
The best possible report we could put together. Yes. And he went on and said some other things that were so powerful. And then when I hear the implications of people attacking the report, talking about he wasn't independent, or they weren't independent, it's like an attack against him. And I could say the same thing about Admiral Mullen. And I just want you to tell us about why you picked the folk that you picked. And by the way, it's done by law. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. The law says you're supposed to pick these people.
That's right.
And so why don't you tell us how you picked them? Were you looking for yes people? I mean, what were you looking for?
Well, Congressman, I greatly appreciate your strong words of commendation on behalf of both Ambassador Pickering and Admiral Mullen. You're right. The statute is very clear. The Secretary of State picks 4 of the 5 members of the Accountability Review Board. As I said earlier today, there have been 19 Accountability Review Board reports. And I think myself and prior secretaries have been very fortunate that they could call on distinguished Americans with long records of service to perform this very important task. When I was thinking about who has the integrity, the independence, the experience to give us an unvarnished look at what happened, the first person I thought of was Ambassador Tom Pickering. He has, as you rightly say, served our nation for more than 4 decades. He holds the rank of career ambassador. That's the highest position in the Foreign Service. He served as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. He served as our U.S. ambassador to Russia, India, Israel, El Salvador, Nigeria, and Jordan. And he also served as the U.S. ambassador and representative to the United Nations, where he led the U.S. effort under the first Bush administration to build a coalition in the UN Security Council during and after the first Gulf War. It's a man who had served in high posts and dangerous posts. He understood what was to be expected, and I counted on him in giving me the most comprehensive report possible. I also wanted to find somebody with military experience, because these questions that have been raised about, could we have gotten assets there? What actually happened with the diplomatic security agents?
I didn't do it.
And Admiral Mike Mullen, who had just recently retired as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was again, I thought, the perfect choice to work with Ambassador Pickering. As you know, he was nominated by President George W. Bush to be chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He served as Chief of Naval Operations. He led NATO's Joint Force Command, U.S. naval forces in Europe, commanded a missile cruiser, a missile destroyer, a tanker. He served in Vietnam and the Persian Gulf.
You need some water, man. Would you like us to take a 60-second, 2-minute break? So, Congressman.
I had the utmost confidence in both of them.
After more than 100 witness interviews, including more than 80 with witnesses no other committee of Congress talked to.
Thank you. Let me say this. This hearing began with the chairman reading a list of questions that he claimed were unanswered. In fact, those questions had been asked and answered many times. As a matter of fact, when we go back to the last questioner, it was Speaker Boehner who, as a matter of fact, last Tuesday, Madam Secretary, Speaker Boehner acknowledged to Fox News the allegation that the U.S. government was involved in an illegal weapons program in Libya has been, and this is according to him, investigated by the House Intelligence Committee and debunked. That's what Speaker Boehner said about this illicit weapons transfer situation. Do you want us to hold up, Madam? Okay. And so, going back today, so these questions, again, were many asked and answered. The new documents we obtained and the interviews we conducted don't contradict the conclusions from the previous investigations. They simply confirm them.
That's factually incorrect.
Premises that were vulnerable and threatened, of course they came to me. I had to make the decision.
That any reasonable person in Secretary Clinton's position or in the position of those with whom she was corresponding about those matters should have known that an unclassified system was no place for that conversation.
Even after this marathon grilling, the Select Committee has found no evidence of any nefarious activity on the part of the Secretary.
I made it a practice to send emails that were work-related to people on their government accounts. I did not primarily conduct business on email with officials in our government. And I made it a practice to send emails that were work-related to people on their government accounts. I did not primarily conduct business on email. And I made it a practice.
I did not primarily conduct business on email. And I made it a practice. I did not. And I made it a practice. I did not primarily conduct business on email. And I made it a practice.
She did not order the military to stand down, and there is still no indication that she approved or denied requests for security in Benghazi.
You were able to find $20 million to support increased security forces in Libya, yet we weren't able to find money to support your own people on the ground.
As the day has dragged on, the Select Committee's cost is raised up to $4.8 million. That's taxpayer dollars, by the way.
You were able to find $20 million to support increased security forces in Libya.
2 weeks ago, the State Department informed the Select Committee that it had spent $14 million responding to requests relating to Benghazi over the past 3 years. This does not include the costs incurred over the past 3 years by other federal agencies, such as the Department of Defense. In a letter to Congress on March 11, 2014, the Defense Department estimated that the total cost it has expended during previous congressional reviews ran into, quote, the millions of dollars.
After more than 100 witness interviews, including more than 80 with witnesses no other committee of Congress talked to.
So that's at least $20 million right there. And that's a conservative estimate because it does not include the cost of the 7 previous investigations by congressional committees. When I think about that amount, $20 million, it pains me to imagine what that money could have done.
You were able to find $20 million to support increased security forces in Libya.
I don't want anyone to mistake what I'm saying. Of course, we needed to know what happened in Benghazi so we could take action to help prevent it in the future. And I have personally investigated this. We compiled an entire database of information on our website about a year ago.
After more than 100 witness interviews, including more than 80 with witnesses no other committee of Congress talked to,
we put together a 133-page compendium. We released a new report this week with the results of 54 interviews. And I want all of those transcripts to be made public to the American people after the appropriate redactions. They ought to be released. I want the American people to see every word, of course, with appropriate redactions, because I don't want anybody accusing me of saying otherwise. But finally, my point is this. Instead of spending this entire $20 million on these 8 investigations, we could have dedicated at least some part of those funds to actually increasing security for our diplomats overseas.
You were able to find $20 million to support increased security forces in Libya, yet we weren't able to find money to support your own people on the ground.
Even if it were just a fraction of that amount, I can't help but wonder how many consulates could have been improved, how many embassies could have been better protected, and how many more of our patriotic American diplomats would be safer today. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I made it a practice to send emails that were work-related to people on their government accounts. I did not primarily conduct business on email with officials in our government. And I made it a practice to send emails that were work-related to people on their government accounts. I did not primarily conduct business on email. And I made it a practice.
I did not primarily conduct business on email. And I made it a practice. I did not. And I made it a practice. I did not primarily conduct business on email. And I made it a practice.
The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Of course they came to me. I had to make the decision. Of course they came to me. I had to make the decision. Of course they came to me. I had to make the decision.